Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Wednesday, August 26th of 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington state government reporter. And in today's episode, Pierce County's charter amendment to make the sheriff an appointed rather than elected position, one of several charter amendments voters in Pierce County will see on the November 3 ballot. Sheriff Keith Swank, as you might imagine, is opposed to this and is convinced that the entire motivation is simply to remove him from office because some people don't like him. And there's a lawsuit now. 3 individuals, including former state auditor Brian Sonntag, have filed to keep this amendment 53 off of the ballot. And they've now got a date before a judge for next week. I spoke to some of those plaintiffs, including former auditor Sonntag, just a short time ago. We'll share that exclusive content with you. And then, did you hear about the words exchanged between Sheriff Keith Swank and Seattle's new interim police chief, Andre Sales? This happened last week at a police graduation ceremony. A lot of it's been on social media for the last few days, but I talked to Sheriff Swank about it and got some feedback as well from the Seattle Police Department on them basically refuting how things went down. And then Elizabeth New at Washington Policy Center recently put up a piece exposing something that she and I both noticed at a June 30th press conference where Governor Bob Ferguson was basically saying, okay, tomorrow, which would have been July 1st, that's when the first beneficiaries of Washington Cares would receive those benefits. It was a woman who spoke at that event and was kind of brought out as the face for the WA Cares program that raised some questions from Elizabeth New and myself. She's dug into this a little bit deeper, and we're going to share that in today's episode. And then finally, the latest in the flap over the public investment impact disclosure statement to accompany the income tax repeal initiative on your fall ballot. That fight continues. There is actually a hearing, or it'll be a closed door hearing of a judge panel for the state Supreme Court set for the 1st of September. But we also have a new lawsuit that's been filed by Arthur West, the guy behind that PIID fight before the state Supreme Court. He's not very happy with some of the comments that have been made publicly and on social media from state GOP chairman Jim Walsh. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. It's a lot, so let's jump right in. We start in Pierce County, where voters will see, at least at this point, they're set to see one of the charter amendments, Amendment 53, on their ballot. And this asks voters if, in fact, they would like to make the position of sheriff in Pierce County an appointed rather than elected position. So it would be the Pierce County executive who makes this appointment. No qualifications, even for sheriff. He could appoint his best friend if he wants to. And this position would not be subject to recall. So voters are going to be asked if, in fact, that's what they want to do. The Pierce County executive's appointment of a sheriff would be starting January 1 of 2027, even though current sheriff in Pierce County, Keith Swank, is set to serve another 2 years. He would be removed from his position if, in fact, voters approve this charter amendment. Probably not something that a lot of people are even aware of, and the amendment on the ballot may not even end up being there. We're going to get into all that, but at first, I want you to see Sheriff Keith Swank explaining that he really thinks this amendment is entirely directed at him because some people don't like his speech.
Their main purpose was to remove me from office because they didn't want to do the recall process because they wouldn't stand muster in court because I haven't done anything wrong. And they want to make the sheriff an appointed position because the current executive is a Democrat. On the far left, people say, I don't have too much trouble with him. We have our differences, but we work well together, I believe. But anyhow, people who were running for that position want to make the sheriff an appointed position. They're banking on it that this county is a Democrat county now, and that if they have a Democrat executive, they'll be able to put a like-minded sheriff in place. So I'm hoping even people who don't like me will say, hey, I want the right to vote for my sheriff or against this guy if he runs again. Now, the conservative districts, the first, second, and third district in the county are conservative districts. Fourth, fifth, and sixth, four, five, six, seven, lean to the left. Some of them are really, like the fourth district is far left, right? And so the first, second, and third, those people overwhelmingly will want the sheriff to remain in an elected position, and they turn out to vote. If they turn out in high numbers, we'll stand a good chance. But if they don't, then the people in the fourth district, which is Tacoma, which should not really have the right to vote on a sheriff because we don't police that area at all, they could overwhelm it, because those are the people who are radical, and they really just want, they're the ones that go out and yell, no kings, no kings, referring to Trump, and then they want to make their executive the king of Pierce County, right? So, which is easy to remember. Anything they accuse the right of doing is what they're doing. So anyhow, to answer your question, I think people District 1, 2, and 3 are going to stand up and vote that way, and just have to pick up enough people on the other districts, because even people who don't like me hopefully will vote to say, hey, we want to keep the sheriff in elected position.
Now, there have been some Pierce County residents that showed up at Charter Commission review hearings earlier this year when they were kind of wading through a whole bunch of potential amendments. And just a quick explanation that Pierce County operates as I think there's about 7 other counties in the state that have their own charters that basically operate as sort of mini constitutions for the county, if you will. I know that's a very simplified explanation, but they can come up with their own sort of rules that they want the county to operate by. And every 10 years, they go back and basically decide, okay, we're going to put these before voters and let voters decide what they think. So we're at that 10-year mark. And that's why there's going to be a series of amendments for Pierce County voters to weigh in on the November 3 ballot. But even some of the people that don't like Keith Swank who showed up at these hearings have said, I don't like him. I would not vote to keep him as sheriff after his current term expires, but I want to be able to vote on the next sheriff. I don't want the county executive to simply be appointing who he thinks should be our sheriff. So there's a lawsuit that's been filed over this now. And one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit is Holly Rogie, former Charter Review Commission member herself. Other plaintiffs include Jeff Joseph, private citizen, and also a precinct committee officer for the state GOP. And he was on Keith Swank's campaign committee as well. So full disclosure there, he obviously supports Sheriff Swank. And the other plaintiff in this lawsuit to keep this amendment off the ballot is former state auditor Brian Sonntag. He's a Democrat, but he believes very firmly that this referendum or this amendment on the ballot shouldn't be there. He believes it is unconstitutional. So I spoke to all 3 of them this morning, as well as their attorney. And here is Holly Rogie, the former Pierce County Charter Review Commission member, explaining why she is a party to this lawsuit.
I believe that this is unconstitutional, because in the Constitution, and we heard this from members of the public, that this is a constitutional position. There is no provision in the Washington State Constitution that allows for an appointment of the office of the sheriff. And so when this proposal was submitted by Commissioner Hunter, I spoke against it, and so did the community. We did have some community come out in support of it, but I believe the overall majority was against it. They already voted in 2006 by a 66% majority to have an elected sheriff, and they voted as recently as 2024 for Keith Swank. And so the voters have voted. Their voice has been heard, and they were really upset that their judgment was being questioned and that they were going to have to deal with this again. So I believe firmly in representing my community, and the community came out very strongly against this proposal. And so I want to represent the voice of the voter, which will be taken away if this gets passed.
As I mentioned, former state auditor Brian Sonntag is also a plaintiff to the lawsuit. He's a Democrat, and he did not support Keith Swank in 2024 on that ballot. He supported Swank's opponent, but he feels very strongly that taking voters totally out of the picture here and making the sheriff in Pierce County an appointed rather than elected position is unconstitutional.
This is not a partisan issue. It's not a partisan office. It's a question of right and wrong. And it is absolutely wrong to be able to, with a charter amendment, eliminate not just the office, but the current office holder's term halfway through his elected term of office. I've never heard of anything like that. I've never seen anything like that.
So we'll see what happens with that legal challenge. Their attorney told me that September the 4th has been scheduled for consideration of the injunction that they hope a judge will agree to keep this off of the ballot. But back a moment here to Sheriff Swank, because I asked him to share what went down last week. I had seen his social media post a few days ago about what happened at a law enforcement graduation ceremony in Burien. Um, Pierce County Sheriff's Office had two deputies graduating, so Sheriff Swank showed up to see that graduation ceremony. And he said that after it was over, a friend of his from the Seattle Police Department, where he worked for 33 years before going to Pierce County, came up to him and said, "Hey, the new interim chief for Seattle, Andre Sales, wants to meet you." And so, and this friend of his from SPD said, he's a good guy. So Swank just thought that maybe he wants to talk about something to do with policing in the state of Washington. Maybe he's a like minded guy. So he went up to interim chief Sales after the graduation ceremony had completed and said, hey, nice to meet you, whatever, niceties were exchanged. And then he said that interim chief Sales attempted to tell him something in his ear. Sheriff Swank is hard of hearing. He's lost almost all hearing in his right ear, and his left ear he does wear a hearing aid for, but he's, got a hearing disability there. So it was a lot of noise in the room. He said, "Let's go outside and chat." So they went around the hall. I don't know if they were still inside actually, but outside the main room where a lot of people were. And I should note that Keith Swank has been very openly critical of the former police chief, Sean Barnes, who was forced to resign right after the bite of Seattle and all of that, with Mayor Katie Wilson basically insisting that he resign. Keith Swank has even called Sean Barnes a buffoon at one point. I don't know if that was a video post or just something he put online, but he's been pretty openly critical of Sean Barnes. So that's the setup for then I'll let Sheriff Swank take it from here as to what was exchanged.
And he leaned over to me, and I thought he was going to tell me something about how crazy Seattle is, because I've been talking smack about it, right? About what's going on there. He leaned over to me and he said this: "I have a message for you from Sean." And so then I went, "Oh." Then he said, "Anytime," something to this effect. And I want to say, I don't know the exact words, but I know the exact intent. "Anytime you want, just get a hold of this buffoon." Because I had called Sean Barnes a buffoon on X, right? And so that means people can say whatever they want to say. What that means is, anytime you want to throw down, anytime you want to fight. I'm a man. I've been a man for 58 years. I was a cop. I've been a cop for 35. I was in the Army before that. You know what I mean? Like, that was exactly challenging me to a fight. Now, normally I'm not at a loss for words, but I wasn't quick-witted enough, because if I would have been, all I said was, "Wow." And I kind of chuckled. And then this guy who wanted to meet me, who really only wanted to deliver a message, he walked away. So he really didn't want to meet me, and he's really not good people. Both of these guys come from a culture of thuggery, wherever it is they're from. Like, they're the boss, and if you say anything to them, they'll fight you or do whatever. That's what they're probably used to doing. That's why they're so terrible. And this guy, Sales, should be relieved from duty also, right?
I did reach out to the Seattle Police Department for comment on this and received this response from Sergeant Patrick Michaud. He said via email, "We don't want to get into a public debate with the sheriff, but this is not a true recollection of the conversation." I went back and said, "Okay, so what does Andre Sales contend he actually said to Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank. And again, he responded back, we're not going to, go back and forth with the sheriff on this, but his recollection is not true. So don't know what Andre Sales says he said or didn't say because they're not sharing that. They're just saying we're not going to get into a back and forth. All right, let's move on. Now to the June 30th launch of WA Cares. It's something we talked about. Governor Bob Ferguson was standing outside the home of a woman, an 87-year-old woman by the name of Evelyn Wade. And he was describing the care that she receives from her niece, Sonia Thomas. And what the program, he said, this is what the program is all about. But Elizabeth New with Washington Policy Center noticed something, that caregiver, the niece, Sonia Thomas, was wearing a purple shirt, SEIU 775, a union shirt. She's part of the SEIU. And she noted and has been looking into this for the last couple of months, saying, hey, wait a minute. She, as an SEIU caregiver, can't have been receiving WA Cares benefits to care for her aunt because those didn't kick in until July the 1st. So Elizabeth New put up an article about this, and she kind of took issue with the suggestion in putting this woman out here and saying, this is why we need the WA Cares program, which takes 58 cents out of every $100 you earn into a fund for long-term care. Whether or not you ever need the benefit, you're going to pay into this WA Cares program for a lifetime maximum benefit at this point of $36,500. So I want you to see this clip from an interview that I did recently with Elizabeth New at Washington Policy Center and some of the issue that she took with the way this whole press conference was staged.
Clearly, this woman who they highlighted and her caregiver were not recipients of WA Cares benefits. They were recipients of something else. I assume Medicaid long-term care, but I haven't gotten a phone call back. But that's the safety net. The safety net already exists. WA Cares is not a safety net. It is a program that takes money from low-income workers and will often give it to people for their long-term care services, whether or not they need taxpayer dependency. So I just think it's totally backward to be decreasing people's ability to be self-sufficient with this WA Cares tax. Yeah, the governor said this is what this program's all about. And that's not what it's all about. That's what Medicaid long-term care would be all about if that person was a Medicaid long-term care caregiver, which is allowed under Medicaid rules. So let's, keep everything in their lane. In time, you'll have people benefiting from WA Cares benefits. That day of the press conference, there had not been a benefit paid out yet. But again, the point that I'm trying to make and have been trying to make for years is that if we wanted a lower Medicaid long-term care budget, we need to protect Medicaid long-term care as a safety net that it is. Right now, we don't protect it. It goes out to more people than it should. State recovery is not pursued in a meaningful way. And instead, they created a program that takes money from low-income workers today for needs they may or may not have and gives it to people with no need for taxpayer dependency. I think they missed the mark on this one.
Now, we don't know if, in fact, Ms. Thompson's aunt, her Medicaid status is not something that's public, but we could assume that she's being paid, the niece caregiver is being paid through Medicaid and not WA Cares. So I did reach out to the governor's office, got nothing back on this, but SEIU did offer a response to me today via email. And so we'll put this up for you. This statement is from Adam Glickman, SEIU 775 Secretary Treasurer. He said, this is a made-up issue, as even Elizabeth New acknowledges the caregiver never said her aunt's care was funded through WA Cares. She was clearly simply providing an example of the kind of care that WA Cares will provide, and that's entirely accurate. And he went on to talk about beneficiaries and how they can use WA Cares. But as New noted in her article, certainly the suggestion was made that this is why we need a Walk Cares program. And as New has repeatedly pointed out in coverage for the last couple of years about the Walk Cares program, even low income workers have to pay into the Walk Cares fund. And right now we are in the middle of an affordability crisis, and 58 cents out of every $100 might not seem like a lot of money for people who make a lot of money, but for lower income workers, that 58 cents for every $100 they make might be something they'd rather have in their pocket now rather than being forced to pay into a fund that they may never need a benefit for. All right, finally, a brief update on the latest in the flap over the Public Investment Impact Disclosure Statement, the PIID. That'll go next to Initiative 645 on the fall ballot. Initiative 645, backed by Let's Go Washington, seeks to repeal the new income tax in the state of Washington. Now, after we told you last week that there was not going to be, that the Supreme Court had rejected and said they won't hear the case, Arthur West, the appellant, the plaintiff in the original suit, was able to get the state Supreme Court to agree to have a panel. And we talked about this earlier this week, a panel review of this because they found out that the ballots don't need to be printed until like maybe next week or so. So there was some more time to review it and they agreed to consider it. But now, and that's happening. So separate from that, though, Arthur West, who's behind this PIID challenge, he's now suing the state Republican Party and Republican Party Chairman Jim Walsh, alleging that Walsh basically defamed him by saying that, and we talked about this a little bit, and Chairman Walsh has been very public on social media, basically suggesting that Arthur West got played by Judge Chris Lanise in court because West is not an attorney himself. And of course, Walsh and Let's Go Washington were not happy because after Judge Chris Lanise in Thurston County Court rejected West's attempt here on the PIID challenge to keep it off the ballot or to amend the wording of it, Let's Go Washington didn't get their case heard. Judge Lanise said, we've dealt with the matter. We're not even going to hear the further challenge. And that did not go over well with Let's Go Washington or Chairman Walsh because they basically think that West got played by the judge. I want to put up this clip again of Judge Lanise, which we've shared before. You may have seen it on social media because some suggested that Judge Lanise may have even violated the Judicial Code of Ethics with the way he acted in court.
Griswold.
Aren't initiatives
What?
that seek to reduce taxes without any reference to the impacts of that not neutral themselves? No one wants to pay taxes, right?
Yep.
But if we all just pretend we don't have to reduce any services as a result of those cut taxes, isn't that not neutral? Isn't that only showing half the picture to voters? Isn't identifying what's going to be cut what's making it neutral in the end because it shows both sides of the ledger? These issues identified in the initiatives, instead of just saying we're cutting taxes, no one wants to think about what's getting cut. We're just cutting taxes, spending. That's all. We're going to pass the buck to someone else.
So again, now West is suing the state GOP and Chairman Walsh, claiming defamation because Walsh made some statements basically saying West didn't know what he was doing in court there. He's not an attorney. And so whatever comments that were made publicly or things that Walsh put up, West believes defamed his character. So I did ask Chairman Walsh for a comment on this, and he sent me this via text message today. We'll put this up. He says, the important thing to keep in mind here is that Arthur's wounded vanity is not the important point. Judge Chris Lanise's unprofessional and exploitive behavior is the important point. Judge Lanise used Arthur. I'm focused on that, and Arthur should be too. Again, that is from GOP Chairman Jim Walsh via text message to me today. One more quick note, and I'll wrap up completely for the day because you can't make this stuff up. A judge has been assigned to hear the lawsuit from Arthur West against GOP Chairman Jim Walsh. You probably guessed now because I teased you here. Judge Chris Lanise will be the one who is going to hear this case. So There you go. That's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Wednesday, August the 26th. As always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. We appreciate that so much, and I hope to see you again on Thursday.